Well, thank you very much indeed, Tasmina, for that somewhat over-generous introduction. But it's a great pleasure to be here, and I have had the privilege of representing my constituents in Inverness and Nairn for 26 years. When I first stood in 1990, Inverness constituency had 3 distinctions. We had in the constituency the highest mountain, and we had the deepest loch, and we had the friendliest people, and also an extremely intelligent electorate, I have to say. But back then, and this follows from what Bertie was saying about the increase in population, the population of Inverness was actually 40,000 in 1990. It is now 83,000. Whereas the population of Scotland has flatlined. It's more or less the same now as it was then. Why is that? Well, I would say in part, and perhaps in large part, and I have to say it was lovely to hear Tasmina pay a tribute to my mother, Madame Écosse, Winnie Ewing. I suppose I'm le garçon, but, or le fils, but she was European to her fingertips. She loved being in the European Parliament, and that's why they gave her the sobriquet Madame Écosse. And she particularly enjoyed Cayleys with many of Bertie's colleagues in the smallest sitting room you can imagine, with about 50 people. We should have put that into the Guinness Book of Records, really, but failed. But she did bring the Loamey Convention to Inverness, and she helped to see the University of the Highlands and Islands established, and she also, as David Wigley pointed out, fought and won a campaign that London said was unwinnable, namely the securing of Objective 1 funds for Europe, and that in turn funded a huge number of infrastructure and social improvements, causeways to islands, airway links, and other things which enable people to live and work in the Highlands and Islands. So I would say that her influence and the influence of being in the EU and being a positive part of the EU in Inverness, especially with the university attracting so many young people, resulted in the increase in that population. Had we seen it replicated in Scotland, of course, Scotland would be a people of 10 million people now, not 5.5. So I did make a speech earlier, but I'm not going to bother writing it because this morning has been so stimulating that I've changed utterly what I was planning to say. And it's particularly enjoyable because yesterday I spent the first day back all day sitting in the chamber listening to the proceedings, and I'm afraid to say it was rather depressing because what I heard was the repetition of brittle arguments which we've heard time and again, a lack of new thought and new ideas, a lack of any glimmer of cooperation between parties, far less between governments. What a contrast with today, with the uplifting speeches that we've heard, the panel session, we've heard David and Bertie and Henry's insights, which have given me such hope and recharged my depleting batteries. So thank you all for raising my spirits after yesterday's depression. And that really is the main point I wanted to make today, which is this, that there is in Scotland a sense of disengagement between the government and the governed. There's never been such a gulf. There's never been such a sense that in Parliament and government we are not tackling the things that people wish us to tackle. And I don't think that's unique to Scotland either. I think it may be the case in England. And I think I get the impression, although I don't have the knowledge, of course, that that may be the case in other European countries as well. Hence, we see the threats of extreme parties like Alternative für Deutschland come forward. And in some countries, of course, the extreme option have already succeeded in Europe, something I never thought I would see because, like Henry, I wanted to see the European Union continue and strengthen precisely because of the aims of was it Schuman, Monnet, and Adenauer, who had the foresight to see, after the Second World War, that economic interdependence through the coal and steel community would be the foundation of bringing people together after the world's most horrendous conflict ever, and they did that. They succeeded. It was, as Henry said, the great success of the second half of the last century. And how sad that in this century we have been regressing, not progressing. So how can we do that? Should we just give up? Is it all too difficult? I don't think so. I think the solutions that are being led in Europe, in Germany and Ireland in particular, offer a way ahead for Scotland. And by that I mean that traditional parties in Ireland, two founding parties of the Free State, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, have come together with the threat from the extremes to cooperate together in a government. In Germany, the same thing. The Christian Democrats, the Social Democrats, I think there's the Bavarian Party as well, have come together, the CSU, to have a firewall against Alternative for Deutschland. Now, if they can do it, why can't we do it in Scotland and indeed Britain? Because there is not really that much dividing the parties. When my mother reconvened the Scottish Parliament, in part of her speech, she paid tribute to people in every main party that had played a significant part in bringing about that day. She paid tribute to the late great Neil McCormick, to Alec Buchanan Smith, to Joe Grimmond, to Labour colleagues, and she did so quite deliberately. And that vision of people working together across the parties is one which may seem naive. It may seem, in the words of the great late Leonard Cohen, the idea of just a kid with a crazy dream. But as he said, cheerfulness keeps breaking through despite everything. So I think there is hope that if we are willing to criticize ourselves, if we are willing to cast aside the old mantras that we are accustomed with and comfortable with and we hear every day in the Scottish Parliament, if we're willing to accept that actually voters want us to work together. Anyone, and I know there's lots of people that, like me, have spent a lot of their time chapping doors, knocking doors, speaking to people, canvassing, going around streets. David is nodding sagely there. David might even be older than me, I don't know, but we've been doing it all our lives. And how often have we heard, why can't you work together? Why can't you work together? I haven't really heard an honest answer to that. I do believe that John Swinney, Anna Sarwar, Willie Rennie, and many of the Tories in the Scottish Parliament could work together and form a coalition. And I do believe that actually in Scotland people would like to have an eclectic government where you pick the very best people from each party. Now that wouldn't remove politics from politics. That's not possible. But it's happened before. It happened in the Second World War when Scotland was de facto independent under the late great Tom Johnson, who Churchill just left to get on with it. And it can happen again. And I scarcely need to mention the economic circumstances of Britain have never been more parlous. The national debt, the difficulty, the lack of room for manoeuvre, the failure to be realistic about challenges are all conspiring to create a situation of financial emergency from which there is no obvious escape other than honesty, hard work, and cooperation. I also think we need to see the voting system in the Scottish Parliament change, and one gesture which would show that the politicians are willing to pass power back to people would be by changing the voting system either from the existing system to the Irish system, the single transferable vote, or to an open list system. Because you see at the moment, the party leaders choose who most of the politicians are. They pick a list, and then they pick who's at the top of the list, and the person at the top of the list wins almost automatically. So where do the people come in? Well, they don't, and they're getting fed up with it, because they, with respect to Amica, they don't want robots to have as representatives.
You've got them already.
Well, far be it from me to say, you know, you may say that, I couldn't possibly, well, actually I can, so Amica actually is about very high intelligence, so there we are. I better not continue with this metaphor. But I think people want better. They don't necessarily want a representative that agrees with them on every point, but they do want someone that they can trust to tell it how it is, to stand up for their interests. I have to say I am completely biased. I have no claim to impartiality whatsoever, because I have, after 50 years, parted company with my party for many reasons. But I think that the principal reason when it comes to it is that there was a proposal, and you know, fishing is at the heart of Scotland. It's part of our DNA, it's part of our culture. There was a proposal to ban our fishermen from the sea, from a further 20% of the sea. There's already 38% designation. There was no scientific evidence for this, and it was being pushed through. Fishermen hadn't been consulted. They were furious, and a furious fisherman is something to behold. Don't get it on a recording, otherwise it could not be recorded for reasons of language. But there was fury, and I thought, what shall I do? And I sat in my office and I thought, what would Winnie have done? So the next day I made the speech, and I got the policy document that was being proposed, and earlier on I made a little bit of tear in it so that this gesture could be performed theatrically. And I said, what should we do with this document? Well, there's three things we can do. We can use it as a firelighter, we can use it as a doorstop, or we can do this with it. And I promptly tore it up, which was very satisfying for me, until my sister, who you may have met yesterday evening, the deputy presiding officer, my younger sister, I may say, pointed out that I was out of order because you cannot use props in the Scottish Parliament. She said that she had waited 60 years to tell off lawfully her elder brother. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we can have a better Scotland, a better Britain. Like Henry, the fears now of a Farage government are no longer fanciful, they're real. Yes. This is a nightmare. We have to counteract that. They will be in the Scottish Parliament next time, thanks to our voting system. That is alarming. And my solution is, let's work together to see them off with an alliance. Now, can I just in closing say that it's a real privilege that the former President of Macedonia is with us, and I did want to say, sir, thank you for the way in which you returned the Alec to Scotland with a ceremony, a guard of honour, which was recorded and shown on TV here, which I watched, which the nation watched. Thank you, sir. You did something that will linger in our memory forever. So the people of Scotland, thank you for that. And thank you for listening to me now. Thank you.